Oh, hi guys, am I on mute? No. Hi guys, I'm Jodine. So I'm the CPD lead for this year. So I've arranged a few lovely speakers to come in and discuss a number of topics with you. So today we have Shaween. I have the pleasure of graduating just after Shaween, but she's an amazing practitioner and has worked both in sport and exercise. And she's going to share an approach that we sometimes don't always use, but I love, the humanistic approach. So, Shaween, I will hand over to you to give, I guess, your amazing spin on the humanistic approach and how you use
Thank
it.
you. Thank you, Jodine. Hello everyone. My name's Shaween. I am a sport and exercise psychologist. As Jodine says, I kind of naturally gravitated over towards the exercise field in my practice just because I enjoy working with ordinary people. I use the humanistic approach. So today I will introduce that approach. I'll talk about it quite broadly, and I cover three concepts today, and those three concepts will be the ones that probably resonate most with me and are most relevant in my practice. So that'll be the first 30 minutes, alongside an applied case study. So an example of really how it works within changing health behaviours, which is what I do largely. And then we will have a 15-minute breakout room where we'll have sort of go off and discuss the topic. And then we'll come back to the main room to tie things together. So if there are any questions as we go along, please don't hesitate to just either come off mute or put it in the chat or whatever, and I'll try and address them as we go. All right. So I thought I would start with this slide. First of all, I mean, this is probably going to be a refresher for a lot of people, but it might be the first time, so I really want to cover the basics and get those right. But essentially, I wanted to show this slide to highlight the difference between sort of directive and non-directive approaches. So using sort of more traditional directive advice giving approaches, we're really pushing people, we're pushing to solve someone's problem for them, and in doing so, I guess that can help in the short term, but long term people don't learn to problem solve for themselves. In this approach, we're typically seen as experts as the practitioner, and the client would therefore be a non-expert. And then we have sort of at the other end of the scale, we have a non-directive approach where we listen to understand, we're asking questions that raise awareness, and we work with people in collaboration. So there's no experts here. I'm working with you, and we're both sort of side by side trying to solve the problem, but really we're putting the person, the client, in the driver's seat to solve their problem. So kind of as we go along, this slide will come back up, but I would like you to think where on this continuum you lie currently. Is it more to a directive side or more to the non-directive? And also where you'd like to be, because for many people, I think it can be really comfortable to be super directive. And when we're working with clients, especially new into the field, it's easy to slip where it's comfortable and just tell people what to do and problem solve for them, because it makes you feel as though you're giving something, you know, you're delivering to them. And actually, it can be quite good to be non-directive as well. I mean, we'll come on to this, but I believe that each of these have their place. And equally, you might be really non-directive and want to sort of strive towards being more directive. So yeah, just thinking about this as we kind of go through the PowerPoint. So humanistic psychology. So we have here Carl Rogers and Abraham Maslow, and they look very lovely, which is in keeping with the general approach of the humanistic theory, which is all about believing people are sort of inherently good, inherently motivated. One thing I will say about the humanistic approach is I think that people tend to view it as quite simplistic, the easy way out, especially relative to other approaches like the cognitive or the behavioural approaches. It actually can be quite difficult to implement because, as I was saying before, it's quite hard not to go just to slip into what's comfortable. I think it requires significantly more confidence to put ownership and responsibility back onto the client. And one thing I love about the humanistic approach is that I think it helps with the exhaustion associated with working in this field. So I could spend all day talking about this approach, but because we have 30 minutes, I'm going to cover, as I said, 3 basic concepts in humanistic psychology, kind of tie it into my practice and how I work with people to change health behaviours by using a case study, and then we'll go off into a breakout room. So first of all, self-actualization. So as I was saying, the humanistic approach tends to view people in a really positive light. So it believes in the best of people. It believes that people are inherently motivated and that the human being is self-actualizing. So what does that mean? Self-actualization is a force that produces self-striving. So people want to be self-fulfilled, and they will strive for that inherently. They are motivated and they want to become the best version of themselves. And this best version of themselves in humanistic psychology is sort of referred to quite often, you'll see in the textbooks, as a fully functioning person. So whilst self-actualization is a force within itself, Maslow, so the lovely gentleman on the right of this slide, he believed that human behaviour is also motivating. So we have needs as humans that also motivate us. So as well as self-actualization directly motivating, we have human needs that motivate people to act. And I'm sure most of you will have seen this pyramid, but essentially what it is that there's a hierarchy of needs. At the bottom of the pyramid are the basic needs. So the basic needs includes physiological needs, air, water, warmth, and then safety needs. So things like feeling safe, feeling secure, and those things are the basic needs. The basic needs need to be satisfied. In other words, we need to feel warm, and we need to feel okay, and we need to feel safe before we can then attend to the higher needs in the pyramid. And the higher needs include things like love and belonging. So the intimacy that we have, the relationships that we have, friends, and also esteem needs. So they're things like feelings of accomplishment, prestige, esteem, the recognition we get, the feeling we get. And when those needs are satisfied, then we can attend to the self-fulfillment needs. In other words, the self-actualization. So being the best versions that we can be. And why I've chosen to mention self-actualization is because in an applied sense, because we're believing that people are naturally and inherently motivated to achieve, we don't spend time telling them what to do, telling them what we think they need to do, because we believe that they want to be the best versions of themselves. So basic concept number 1, self-actualization. Basic concept number 2, the client-practitioner relationship. So this is all Rogers. Rogers is this man here on the left. And Rogers talks about person-centeredness. And really key in person-centeredness is that people are the experts. He believes, humanistic psychologists believe, people are the experts of their own lives. They know what will work best for them. And so we simply need to nurture that by offering them 3 things. The first is genuineness. The second is non-judgmental caring or unconditional positive regard. And the third is empathy. So it's through us demonstrating those things that the person is nurtured to be the best version of themselves, to go on and achieve self-actualization. So first of all, you can see that certificate of authenticity there. That's all about genuineness. So that requires the practitioner to be authentic, to be honest, to be sincere. And whilst the practitioner should be ideally genuine, that would not include any sort of displays of negativity. It would not include any criticism or disgust. And that leads on to the hands all applauding there, the non-judgmental caring, because we have complete uncensored acceptance of the client. And why that is important is because we need the client to know that we don't judge them. We're going to offer them unconditional positive regard so that they feel comfortable to open up and disclose the things that they need to. And then the empathy, as I'm sure everyone's aware, is really just to be with someone, to share their experience and connect. And empathy, of course, can be demonstrated verbally. So, you know, just as I'm here with you, can't even imagine how that must feel. And non-verbally. And that can be things like eye contact and head nods and all of that stuff. So basic concept number 2 is the client-practitioner relationship. So we've got self-actualization, the client-practitioner relationship, and then the third, which is the self. So this is another central concept in humanistic psychology, and it's all concerned with how people view themselves. And you can see on that picture there, we've got the king looking in the mirror and he's seeing a pawn looking back. So that would indicate he has a pretty poor self-confidence, self-concept or self-image. And what we would do in humanistic psychology is we would typically work with that person, with this king, to have him look in the mirror and actually see him for all of his potential as a king. So the self, to go back to that, includes someone's values, expectations, their ways of understanding themselves. And I think the most important point to make about the self from an applied perspective is that the way people view themselves influences their behaviour. So if you want someone to behave in a certain way, change their behaviour, whether that's health behaviours, whether it's other behaviours, and achieve that level of self-fulfillment, then you must work on the self-concept. So our aim then as a practitioner is to strive for what we call in humanistic psychology congruence between the current self and the ideal self. When those things are incongruent, then a person isn't fulfilled. They're not going to move towards fulfillment. So we believe that we want to narrow the gap between these two things, and the person will then move towards that self-actualization. Importantly in this as well, you know, we want to prevent people from, you know, from measuring themselves based on other people. We hear that all the time, you know, oh, she doesn't, you know, for instance, eat well, yet she's so thin or whatever. And so what we try and take out the social comparison of things, and we use internal values, internal judgments. You might hear this as being referred to as being more sort of task focused rather than ego focused. So your task focus is all about the effort, it's about process, and your ego focus, that's where the comparisons come in, that's where the winning matters, that's where being better than someone else matters. So we really want to shift that. So the self is all about bridging the gap between the current and the ideal self to help people become fully functioning. And how we do that is through the person-centered, non-directive counselling. So the 3 concepts: self-actualization, client-practitioner relationship, and the self. And then the goals overall for the client, before I go on to the case study, is to become fully functioning, as I said. So we want people to develop this awareness of where they are and where they would like to be. And we believe that in developing that awareness, people will move towards, because they are inherently motivated to do so, they will move towards where ideally their ideal self would be. They would therefore become, sort of through being self-aware, able to trust their judgments, able to make their own decisions, and become that fully functioning person that we would like them to be. So that first picture there, it's an awful picture. I couldn't really think how to depict a fully functioning person except that. But the second picture is kind of there to promote that self-awareness, the freedom to choose. So people now have choice and they can decide what route they're going to take. And then for the practitioner, to help someone achieve that goal, that overall goal of being fully functioning, we use the non-directive counselling. We display the genuineness, we display the empathy, the non-judgmental caring. And we do that through things like using reflections. You can see in that third picture there, someone saying, I feel angry and upset. and you're just simply reflecting that back to them. You know, people have a real tendency to believe the things that they hear themselves say. So you feel angry and upset, for instance. And then also asking the awareness raising questions, the open-ended questions, just simply being there with the client, developing the sense of self again so that people can become fully functioning. So to bring this slide back, thinking about where the humanistic approach sits, it's very much, as I've said it about probably 10 times now, non-directive. We're listening, we're asking the questions that raise awareness, and we're reflecting back using the client's own words. We're not interested in solving someone's problem for them because we believe they can do that themselves. So I'm going to spend probably 10 more minutes on a case study, so how I use these concepts in my practice to help people change their health behaviours, and then we will go into breakout rooms after that for about 15 minutes as well. So this is a case study of Sarah. This is a pseudonym, but she received person-centred therapy for weight loss. So she came to see me following a health check, and she'd gradually been putting on weight, but she was really shocked to find out at 24 that she was overweight on the BMI scale. She said, "That's never been me. I'm not overweight. I've never been overweight, and I just don't feel happy within myself. I feel that, you know, I don't recognise myself." And for me, when someone says that, I immediately just think I mean, it's not great, but it's great to know that there's work to be done on the self. So first and foremost, I think from my perspective, what did I do? It was important throughout all of the sessions that we had together, which spanned 16 weeks. It was important that she knew that I was there for her, that I wasn't going to be sort of offering advice, offering solutions, but that I would do the things that I've spoken about. So it's, you know, displaying the unconditional positive regard, displaying the genuineness, offering things like affirmations, reflecting back. So I did all of that from my side, and then we did a needs analysis. Now, typically, most people here will know that a needs analysis involves kind of using a psychometric questionnaire or a structured interview, and essentially assessing what the problem is for someone or what the pathology is or whatever it might be. And in humanistic psychology, we're not really interested in identifying problems or pathologies. We're more interested in where people can go to and their potential. And so because of that, we actually used an unstructured interview. So that for me was asking Sarah, you know, just simply tell me a bit about yourself. It was quite an informal chat. It was very much led by her. So the things that came up sort of guided our conversation. Questions like, tell me why you've come to see me. Tell me why you'd like to begin an exercise program. Tell me what achieving this change would look like. And I think it was through those questions that we were able to have a really great discussion where I was then able to display all those things that I've spoken about from the practitioner side. So case formulations are usually informed by the needs analysis. And again, typically that's psychometric questionnaire. If we're, say, adopting a CBT approach, you would use that to assess what the problem that someone has is, and then it would provide a route ahead in terms of intervention. Because we're not concerned with all of that, to be honest, traditional working models informed by these sort of standardized psychometric measures are essentially inappropriate when working in a humanistic context. So a standardized case formulation wasn't actually carried out. Sarah self-identified what she wanted to do. Yes, I will share the slides, thank you. So I will do that afterwards. But a standardized case formulation wasn't carried out. But because Sarah knew herself that she was unhappy with her weight, unhappy with herself, she didn't feel happy, she didn't feel confident, for us it felt like there was a really clear route ahead. We were going to work on her weight and we were going to work on herself. So there was no standardized case formulation. The intervention that we did use, we explored Sarah's sense of self. So that was the overarching theme of the consultancy that we had together, and we identified a mismatch between her current and her ideal selves. So where she was currently and where she was ideally, where she'd like to be ideally, the differentiator in that journey was it did come down to her weight and how she viewed herself. Themes that came up, Sarah's definition of success. So she felt that initially being successful would be going back to her doctor and telling him, you know, I'm not overweight anymore, or you know, showing her partner how great she looked. And so it was all very much, there was an emphasis on other people. So what we wanted to do, in line with the humanistic approach, so with curiosity and without judgment, was really start to help her recognize herself, the parts of herself that she did approve of. So she approved of herself as a daughter, she approved of herself as an employee, she approved of herself as a sister, but also what would need to happen to approve of yourself fully. Because remember, we are trying to create this fully functional, sort of flourishing individual. And again, it was the same thing coming out, you know, weight loss, improved confidence, better health outcomes, that kind of thing. So she was encouraged to be more task focused and sort of less ego focused. And that terminology wasn't used, but just for the sake of here. And the other theme that came up was the here and now. So she would fixate on the past. She would use the past to make unhelpful judgments about the present. And so we try to encourage her to experience what's happening at any given moment and respond appropriately to that in the here and now. There was also a process of developing awareness and responsibility, teaching Sarah to sit with the uncomfortable, accept it as it is. And it was my hope that if she could see I was accepting her as she is, and all of her emotions and all of her feelings and thoughts, that she would then be able to do that too. And then the last theme in the 17 weeks was about her trusting herself. So it was all about teaching Sarah that it was okay to trust herself, that she could choose how to respond. You know, so many times we see people who feel completely, you know, hopeless, and they don't know what to do, and they've got this information but they don't know what to do with it, and they don't feel in control. So it was choosing how to proceed and actually feeling okay with the choices, rather than looking to others, as I was speaking to guide her. So in the 9 sessions, it was 9 sessions that she had, we did try and develop a self-image. Ultimately, she wanted to start an exercise program so that she could lose weight. And that was for her to go away and research into and implement. So there was no advice giving from my side. So there was emphasis on empathy, non-judgmental caring and genuineness throughout. And our whole aim was to narrow that gap that she had between where she is currently and where she'd like to be. She was able in that time to redefine her success away from other people and start to become more task focused. So her successes were coming from what she was telling me she was doing week in, week out. And she was able to start to try and live in the moment. So when I say that, it's more the awareness that came with being able to identify when she would drift and bring herself back. So she had better self-awareness to be able to assess her choices, and then she importantly could take responsibility for them. She'd moved from considering doing exercise to doing it. And I think what's really important is that resulted in 5 kilos of weight loss, which is incredible. And she also filled out a feedback form, which told me she was feeling happier and closer to her ideal, which was really nice. You know, she didn't leave the finished product, but the idea wasn't for her to. The idea was for her to get into a position where she felt she could self-manage herself. In the 17 weeks, I never told her what she needed to do. I never told her that she needed to lose weight. I never told her that she needs to exercise more. That wasn't of importance in that time. So my whole aim was to be with her, was to believe in her, was to reflect back the things she was saying, to ask the questions that I felt would help raise the awareness, but to stay with her where she was Meet her there with the non-judgmental caring, the empathy and the genuineness, all in a hope to boost her self-concept and ultimately hope that she would go on to become this fully functioning person. So I think that sort of encompasses the work that I did with Sarah. It's one example of many. It's for weight loss. You get obviously a range of different sort of health behaviours. You get a range of different things come up, and you can work with people in very different ways. But in this case, it was very much a situation of the self. So what would be really great for the next sort of 15 minutes would be to sort of talk around the strengths and the limitations of the humanistic approach. And I'm really keen, not necessarily for you to talk around the things that I have, so the 3 concepts that I have, but I really want to invite you to bring your own wisdom into the room to discuss your experience of the humanistic approach, as well as what you believe the strengths and the limitations are. And then what we will do after we've gone into the breakout rooms is we'll come back, tie it all up together, and I might suggest 1 or 2 routes ahead based on certain limitations that may come up. So Jodine, shall I hand back to you?
Emily will do the breakout rooms for you guys.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, so I'll pop everyone into the breakout rooms now, and then I will give you a little bit of a warning, but we'll bring you back at about 1:45. So
Emily, not me.
Yeah. We should get a little. You should get a little message to go out into the breakout rooms.
Thank you, Juliet. Nice to see you on here.
Hi everyone, welcome back. Sorry to interrupt your discussions. I hope everyone was having great discussions. Sorry to interrupt them. We're just gonna have another little bit of a discussion as a group. So I'll hand back over again.
Yeah, so is there an echo, or is it just for me?
No, there's an echo. I don't know where it's coming from, but now everyone has an echo.
What now? Do I just carry on? Okay, so yeah, it would be really good to hear everyone's thoughts on what was discussed, and then there's just a few more minutes, and essentially what I'll do is I will tie it together, but also use sort of the strengths and limitations that have informed my practice and sort of tweaked the way that I work, sort of what I found works best, I guess, when dealing with health behaviours. So it would be good if someone can pop in the chat or come off mute and just share what was discussed.
So I'll thanks, Shaween. I think I'll just get it started. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, great. I can hear you fine.
Yeah, so it was just interesting speaking with Kelly that when you mentioned the therapeutic approach and humanistic approach and how the needs analysis and the case formulation kind of evolved based on that, it seemed very much akin to how, you know, your epistemology, your methodology in a research setting also shapes the way in which you write your results and discussion. So it was interesting how to consider that, you know, if you use a different therapeutic approach, the way in which you present those needs analysis, case formulation can be different. It doesn't have to be so rigid as well. It can reflect those philosophical differences in that way.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, actually. I think for me, when I was practicing, when I was in the QSEP stage, I read Keegan's Being a Sports Psychologist. Have you read it?
Oh yeah, he's my supervisor. So, yeah,
oh, amazing!
Oh, that's
so
useful.
Yeah, so so useful.
I've read it. Yeah, definitely read it. Yeah.
I can imagine. So I think in reading that, he makes a real point that although sort of philosophies differ, it's still really important to go through those processes as a psychologist and make sure that you're. And so I thought it would be important to write out, you know, how how I would do a needs analysis using this approach. And to be honest with you, I've thought a lot about the case formulation, and I think it's so sort of it's just what's the word I'm looking for? It doesn't align with the humanistic approach at all. So the way that I tend to work is just to, I guess, have the person in front of me self-identify what the intervention should look like. So yeah, thank you for sharing those thoughts. Very interesting.
Shaween, I'm going to read something from the chat. Cedric has said, how did you, I guess this is a question or a potential limitation, how did you protect your client from a strong weight loss focused, as in result, and this comes up a lot, exercise program that might not align with what you discussed in a session's task and process? Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I think I understand it. So I don't think I did, to be honest. For her, I think the most important thing was to discuss the self. I think how she went about the weight loss was very much for her to decide. She did actually ask me if I had any advice or I could give her a program or something like that. And I said no, that I would want her to sort of go away and look into it, and sort of advocating that problem solving. But that would probably be it. Did I answer that or not at all?
I can answer that. You partly answered the question, because the way you approached it with her to letting her figure it out is very congruent with the humanistic approach, I would say. But I was just thinking of the real big bad world out there. If she ends up with a coach that then doesn't align with that, and that she might feel the pressure to lose weight or to follow a certain approach in order to lose weight, that might really disrupt her process that she's going through with you to self-explore what does exercise mean to me and my body. And I was just wondering there, how can we protect clients from that without being too directive?
Yeah, I mean, that is an excellent question, to be honest. I would be keen to hear from anyone else in the room if they have any suggestions with that. It's not something that I've thought about before, sort of when you hand someone over, so to speak, to another professional, because she did go to a PT, what if they are hugely sort of driven by the results? Does anyone have any thoughts? And how might that impact our client?
I guess this is a chat. I guess I'll just chime in. But I guess this is a challenge with our field anyway, and your philosophy, because your philosophy is only renowned to you in the way in which you work. But if you have to hand over your client to another professional, I guess a handover conversation might be good, if you can do that. But if you don't have that opportunity, you have to kind of allow your client to make the choice whether they want to go with that referred professional. I know you haven't referred them onto a PT, but they would have chosen and aligned with that personal trainer's goals, values, and philosophy. So I guess you have to kind of trust that they're doing the right thing for them, because we're all going to have different philosophies. Even me and you will have different philosophies. Sorry, the train's going by. But yeah, I guess it's not a limitation that anyone has researched or talked about. So if anyone on this call does want to do some research on that, I would love to read the paper.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, Jodie. And I think it's interesting how, you kind of hope that in all of the learning and the summary of the learning towards the end of the consultancy, that they take it away and they continue to be task focused. But with a person who has a propensity to kind of put a lot on the importance of other people in the first place, that I suppose that is a risk, a very real risk. So thank you for sharing it. I have written it down actually, so I'm going to think about that one. Is there anything else before I kind of tie together what my experience of the limitations within humanistic practice are, and how I have tweaked my practice to try and overcome those? Okay, so So this is real feedback. This is my experience, but this is real feedback that I've received from clients when working in sort of as a humanistic practitioner. So most people will tell me that they have improved self-awareness. Most people will tell me that their confidence has improved and that they felt really supported and understood as well. And then what I got this feedback, I remember when I got this feedback, and it really upset me. And I think it's because we in this field, we want to help people. And they said, really nice person who cared a lot, but I felt frustrated because I wanted answers and advice, but I didn't get it. And I think this is a limitation which comes up time and again. It's a known limitation of the humanistic approach. And I think for me, I started to become quite frustrated myself. And there was part of me that was saying, you know, careful, watch the sort of transference and just stay true to where you are in your values and your position and the belief that people are inherently motivated. But then as time went on, I thought, I'm not delivering a holistic service. I mean, Jodine, you kind of mentioned it there. I'm sending people out a lot. And I wasn't a PT at the time. I did then go on to get a qualification because I thought a bit of information was needed, a bit, you know, there's a time and a place to bring in information. But I think we see people in practice who have different needs. And, you know, whilst you were in the breakout room, Jodine was telling me about a client for her that she says that it just doesn't work with them. They just don't want that. They want a bit of direction and they need that. And we all come across people who don't respond well to that, and they're looking for something directive, they're looking for advice or knowledge or information, whatever it is. And so in those situations, what do we do? And so I've thought about this quite a lot, and the first thing I suppose would be a proper intake. So learning to actually assess the client expectations ahead of consultancy. So what are you looking for? Checking it aligns with your frameworks or your values or whatever you want to call it, to increase the likelihood that you're compatible. But then I think, importantly for me, on the other side of the coin, there is a need to offer some sort of flexibility. So I think as long as it aligns with your values, as long as you, for me, in my case, remain humanistic, then I thought, you know, I need to start sort of shift gears a bit, because I want to be compassionate and I want to be genuine and all of those amazing things. But how do I do it? And so I remember I spoke to my supervisor, and she recommended to me that I look into motivational interviewing. I'm sure many of you have heard of this. I'm not going to talk about it for long, just to very briefly introduce it for anyone that hasn't. It's rooted in positive and humanistic psychology, but it's still very directive. It's not a technique, it's just an interviewing style. So you can see the words in bold, so it's collaborative, but now we're being goal oriented. Now I'm listening to language of change when people are talking. So when they indicate that they want to change, we're talking around that. In cases, it will be appropriate for me to share knowledge or advice, and I will do that, but I will do it in a sort of a humanistic way, by asking permission, by asking people what they already know, by really trying to keep them in the driver's seat, keep them empowered. But you can see that it's still humanistic. It's all about people's own reasons for change. It's about acceptance and compassion. And so for me, it was kind of a nice segue where I was able to actually slide up and down the scale, moving from being directive to non-directive and vice versa. And I will generally try to stay as non-directive as I can. But as the situation started to call for it, to be able to be a bit more directive in a compassionate and genuine way. And I suppose to the point that came up before, knowing that I can trust my approach with the client, knowing that first and foremost, I care about their well-being, that has helped me. So I think very last slide, and the last thing to say is I love this quote by Carl Rogers. Very idealistic, I know, but people are just as wonderful as sunsets when you let them be. I look at a sunset, I don't find myself saying soften the orange a bit on the right hand corner. I don't try and control a sunset. I watch with awe as it unfolds. I think people are very much the same. I think that they are wonderful, just as they are. And so we should try, I guess, to help them within a humanistic way to be the best versions of themselves without trying to control or change them. And that's everything from me.
Thank you, Shaween.
Thank you.
I guess we've got some last bits in the chat. Someone lost sound, so sorry about that. But Cedric talked about the existential branch of humanistic psychology. So if anyone wants to go and do some research into that, there are some papers on that which are really good. But thank you everyone for joining today. Please make sure that you fill in the feedback form. It helps us improve these sessions and make sure that we are doing the right things for you. And yeah, share it with everyone. Rewatch it on YouTube if you want to take away some more tips and tools. But we thank you all for coming.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.